I personally feel you make the cause cool.
Hmm.
Once you make the cause cool, everybody will want to hop onto it. Everybody would want to bring about that change. It will become suddenly important for everyone. I think if that's how they understand it, then so be it. We make them understand like this.
Hello, everyone. Welcome back to another episode of the Voice of GenC. I'm Ria Sada from the team, and this is the second time I'm recording an episode as a host. Otherwise, I usually work on the back end editing. This is a really special episode because I have Varsha from Schbang on this episode. Both Varsha and I come from a marketing background, so we're going to be tackling the topic of the role of marketing in climate change. Varsha, really excited to have you here.
Same here. Thank you for having me.
Varsha, would love for our listeners to get an intro into what you've been doing over the years and your role at Shebang.
So, for the ones who don't know, Shbang is one of India's leading independent advertising agency, and one of the largest ones too. At Shbang, we've had the privilege of working with some of the biggest clients in the country, like FMCG companies, and it ranges across categories. So while we're working with Britannia, we'd also be working with say a B2B company called Finolex. So we have a whole range of companies that we work with. And while we were working with these companies, we realized that we've been able to move the needle for them, in like the business needle. So we thought that we are doing something right in terms of communication. We know how to talk to the people. We get the pulse of the audience really well. So why not use these skills to also create something for impact? And that is when and this is also we came up with this concept of Schbang For Good right in the middle of pandemic, and that is when all of us were reconsidering life, rethinking our purpose. If something happens to us tomorrow, you know is this what we want to continue doing? And we thought, and all of us asked ourselves, and we really wanted to do something in the impact space as well. So as a company, Shbang has always, even before we started Shbang For Good, we've always been very impact driven. So we have very proactively worked with brands in the impact space, like NGOs. Even through our internal initiatives, we've promoted this whole aspect of creating an impact, but we really wanted to take it to the next step, which is where Shbang For Good also comes in. So just to clarify, Shbang For Good is not Shbang's NGO. We also have Shbang For Good Foundation, through which we do all our CSR efforts. But Shbang For Good is different. It's doing advertising only for impact. So yeah, and over the last 3 years, we started in the pandemic, like I said. Over the last 3 years, we've had the privilege of working with brands like Teach for India, like Reliance Foundation, like Shivnadar Foundation. So some of the bigger names in the ecosystem as well.
Great. Thank you so much, for giving a great introduction into Shebang and telling us the story behind why you started Shebang for Good. I think the pandemic definitely led to a lot of us, rethinking what our purpose is in that sense and looking at deeper meaning of life. I mean, for me, the pandemic is when I realized that the climate space is where I want to be, and that's when I made the switch. So
Right.
I definitely understand how and when you started Shebang for Good. And I think to begin with, I would just like to get your idea on what you think marketing's role is in driving climate change for that matter.
Okay. So I think I'll just take one step back, right? I will talk about marketing's role in impact overall, and of course, as a product, it also then applies to climate change, right? So if you see marketing now and marketing a couple of years back, you will see a lot of evolution. It has evolved quite a lot. Earlier, it was very rampant, and marketing is also a reflection of the society, right? We make ads, like this is a common thing. We understand the pulse of the audience, and then we make ads accordingly. Or, all marketing comms is done as per the pulse of the audience. So it's really the audience deciding. Now, impact is becoming very core to how all of us think, because it's also the need of the hour, and a lot of young people are more conscious. They want to be a part of the change, and they don't want to be on the sidelines, which I also believe comes from a certain level of privilege, but that's a conversation for another day. But I personally feel that impact really, like, marketing can really create an impact. If you see the ads that we are seeing right now, we wouldn't see such evolved ads, just in terms of a lot of representation also, how women are represented in the ad, how conversations are had, just different things are now. Marketing is really making those brands and people take a lead on those conversations, right? For example, we see a lot of women doing a lot of, like for example, share the load. If you look at that campaign, right? So now that has initiated a conversation in so many households that, should we also, like, are we doing something wrong? Do we want to be in our, if you, I don't know if you remember the ad, but do we want to be in our 60s where we are apologizing to our apologizing for setting the wrong examples for our children? Probably not. So how do we course correct and do better now? So, share the load again has become a conversation where, like, in most households now, which wasn't the case. So I think that is where marketing has come in. That is where marketing has everyday impact. So I think in terms of climate change also, mainstreaming conversations is something that we can do with marketing. And in, like, we can start small, because it's I understand it's also an evolved conversation. Not it doesn't impact us on a regular basis. So not a lot of people are receptive to it. So what I think we should start with is basically start talking about the anger that we feel towards no action, especially for younger people. That feeling of anger is really there. So how do we validate that anger, saying, okay, you're feeling the right thing, and encourage them to do something about it. Yeah, so I feel like honestly we have to understand the impact on a niche cause. We need to first understand how historically marketing has impacted the society, and how it has resulted in a change. And then we just have to replicate that model. If the model is validation of emotions first of the TG, then we do that first. And then if the second step is that inspire action, then we should do that next. But if we, like, I think we need to go step by step. We can't go to action at the moment, because I don't think our audience is there yet.
Got it. And so you think right now, you've definitely seen that increase in the need to create impact related messaging from brands, right? Do you think that end consumers are driving that change, or do you think brands are doing that also intuitively because that's who they want to be?
See, I feel like I don't think it's either or, it's both. Brands also consciously are driven by human beings and people, and those people are becoming more conscious. So even brand managers want to drive that change. Even the people who, like, I think, but of course, like, the whole thing of it being acceptable, being cool, being a priority, that has been driven by consumer sentiment. So I do definitely think that, like, personally, I don't buy makeup that is tested on animals. Now that has only happened because I've been made aware of it, and now I understand better. And how will I know that this particular makeup is not tested on animals? Only when they advertise or talk about it actively, or when they market it that way. So now, if the consumer is only buying your product when they understand the environmental implications of it, I think then you have to go out and actively talk about it also. If you were not doing any efforts, if you're not making any efforts, you will lose market share. People have started losing market shares. And also now there is more democratization of how things work. So there can be new people coming in and taking that. If you as a big player are not filling in that gap, somebody else will come and give that service and take that market share. So brands are really understanding that they need to have these conversations. These are important conversations, and go beyond the conversations. Greenwashing is rampant. So it's not enough to have conversations.
Yeah. Which brings me to my next question actually. You mentioned greenwashing. I think to avoid greenwashing, there needs to be a lot of consumer advocacy.
Right.
Consumers need to know, okay, you're claiming to be sustainable, but what does sustainability really mean? And for example, the latest example I can think of is that Apple came out with a video, right, where they're talking about the September in the event. They were talking about being carbon neutral and their progress on the same. To a layman, as a consumer, that seems like a great initiative, right? But personally, are the consumers aware enough to know if the impact they're creating is truly, like, is it genuine? Is it enough? Because they're only going to highlight everything good that they're doing, but not everything behind the scenes, right? Or I understand your point about starting these conversations with consumers, but do you
Right.
think media also has the role to educate these consumers on various things?
Of course, absolutely, absolutely. And I feel like now with content being so democratized, like so many people are creating content. So it's not like only a handful of people know this information. There are people who are imparting this information. So it is very accessible. The reason why so many brands cannot, like, like, they will come out one day, like their truths will come out one day, because there's information is so accessible now. Right, so I feel like, but still brands continue to do it. They continue to greenwash, they continue to, like pinkwash, they do all of that, and I don't think that's gonna stop anytime soon. So I think that is where our role comes in, where we tell them that you can't only do this, you have to make the right efforts and then talk about the efforts. Right. So I think like every time when we do a campaign with any of our clients as well, we ensure like there's no protocol in place as such, but we do urge them to go about and make an impact also in that space, a real impact that impacts real people. So
And but so usually I've seen that whenever in a agency client relationship, the client always has a upper hand, right? And
yeah, so I feel like that's also evolving, that's also changing, and I think increasingly, a lot of clients across have started looking at agencies as partners, as just extended teams. And the power dynamics, see, I'm not gonna lie to you, power dynamic always, of course, exists. But also, they have started understanding that we are subject matter experts, and this has also happened because of consumer advocacy, right? If XYZ brand has done greenwashing and they've been called out, and consumers have not tolerated that, they've called it out, they've spoken to power, then brands are afraid of being called out. They are very cautious now. It's not like the old times anymore. They're not just like, they are not the ones holding all the information and all the power. Now information is just as accessible to the consumers as well. So sooner or later they will have to have the consequences of it.
yeah, it's actually really nice to hear that the power dynamics are changing slightly, because I do remember working with an agency years ago, and it was not a great experience, right? It's really good to know that the dynamics are changing and there's more respect for
Of course,
agency.
there's more work to be done, but definitely now, especially when we go when we go to commercial brands saying that, okay, do you want to do a cause impact campaign, then they know that we know what the audience on the internet wants to hear. We know the sentiment there, and they probably don't know that as much as we do, because we really are always on the internet. We know what is getting called out. We know what the right people to speak to. So I think especially in the campaigns that we have done with the brands, they've been more receptive. And honestly, like some clients, I would just like to also call that out. Some clients have been so good that they've given us the full liberty, and they've executed impact projects with us, to the extent where they've changed their hiring policies. It's some clients have really gone out of the way to to bring about that. They've really understood that real impact is important and it cannot be a lip service. So they've gone ahead and done those changes.
Oh wow, that's great. Would you like to highlight any one of these campaigns?
So we did this one campaign where we basically made recreated storybooks and movie posters from like from our childhood, but reimagine them for the childhood of the future. So, for example, we took the Jungle Book and we made it the Barren Book, because in 2050 it's probably going to be that. And then we took Frozen, the movie Frozen, to melt it. Now, these are also childhood classics. Like, we've all read the Jungle Book, we've all seen Frozen. But what is the future that you give to these children? So the Frozen became melted, and there was also one more that I think we've done. I can't remember the title that we'd written for that, but we've done a series of three. So that personally is like a favorite for me, because it got like a very good engagement and interaction, and people really resonated because these are really classics from our childhood. And then there's another one that we'd actually done that was also quite interesting. I really liked it. It was one of the first few campaigns I worked on in the climate space. It was around water conservation, and what we'd done was we'd basically shown a restaurant setting. It was almost like a live experiment where people very mindlessly, like, waste water. Like, for example, a woman is applying lipstick in the washroom and she's just left the tap on, or if somebody is asked for water, they ask the waiter to put pour full glass, and they've only consumed half the glass. So these are very small instances where water is getting wasted. So what we do is we show these instances without calling it out or anything. We show these instances, and then a child, towards the end of the film, the child comes and says to all these adults who were wasting water, he goes to their table. The child goes to the tables and says that this is a gift for you, and it's a properly nicely wrapped gift, and the adults are confused, what is this gift? And the adults open the gift, and then it's a black globe, because that's what we are leaving behind for the children. And then they end by saying, thank you for contributing towards my future, and the future is this. So it's very like driven. I think a lot of our communication is driven by what you're leaving behind, because that's something that people don't think.
Yeah. And so I think initially when people started communicating about climate change and that being real, there was a lot of fear used in the messaging, saying that if you don't do this now, by 2030, your kids, as you said, right, won't have any water left behind. I feel like personally for me, fear, like I've become very, I don't get affected by that anymore, right? I've become so used to it that my brain automatically scrolls through. Do you think, do you think similarly, or is it just something I've been biased to because that's the only kind of media I've been consuming recently?
Honestly, I do think with climate, anger and fear are two emotions we really need to tap into. I don't think we can show hope here as much. Like, I'm not being a pessimist here, but I do think that they need to know what they're doing, because only when you know the consequences of your action. I think more than fear, it's really like consequences of your action. That's how I look at it. It's not fear. We're not saying, oh my God, get scared. No, this is a fact. It's gonna happen to us. It's happening to us. It has started, right? So I do feel like more than fear, it's just showing them the mirror. That's how I look at it, and I don't think we should stop doing that. Even though people get desensitized to it in a way, but that they are to anything. Look at the world we live in. There's so many problems. We're desensitized to most of it now. We've seen so much, and also it's not about people. Yeah, like I do. Of course, consumer action. No, not even consumer. Of course, everyday small action makes a lot of difference. But that burden is also not on people like us to carry. That is a burden for governments and big corporations and all of that. That needs to be something for them.
I actually have two follow-up questions from here. So, while I agree that it is important to share the consequences of people's action, personally at Climes, what we believe in is trying to make climate action as fun as possible, so that we can get more engagement and more want from not just the end consumers, but even brands to want to learn more and do more. Right? That's the angle we've chosen to go with.
But how do you make it more fun?
So we have a product called Climes Lite, where a brand can set aside a monthly climate budget, right? They can say, I want to set aside a certain number of rupees on a monthly basis against which they earn Climes. Climes is our carbon credit instrument. Now they can distribute these Climes as a reward to the end consumer.
Okay.
So, for example, if we take we recently went live with a brand called the Baker's Dozen. They are a artisanal bake like bread brand primarily, and they have purchased. They've set aside a monthly budget, and then they're distributing these clients to their consumers with a QR code. Once the consumer scans the QR code, they are led to a Indian map where we map out 8 projects that we have on board, right? So these
Okay.
8 projects the end consumer can learn more about. So what we're trying to do is um, we're trying to educate the end consumers about various carbon projects. So you can avoid or remove carbon through regenerative agriculture, through agroforestry, through converting waste to fuel, etc. Right? So we try to teach them about these. It's an interactive tool where the consumer can go through each and every project on the map and then decide where they want to send clients.
Yeah, that's very cool. I think just gamifying things in a way, right? Interesting. That's actually very interesting. Never looked at it like that. Uh, but I feel like making people who are already burdened by systems, right? We're already burdened by systems that are rigged to be against us. Now, burdening them more with this responsibility also sort of seems wrong to me. For example, if you know about this alternate search app,
Ecosia?
yeah, Ecosia, right. So now Ecosia, I use Ecosia and I know they plant trees for all the searches, but honestly, like Google is just easier to use. If you've used Ecosia, you'll know that. Even though I'm contributing to a big organization and there's no data privacy, all that, but again, what I need is my work to be done faster as a person who's already so burdened, right? So I just feel like even though these alternatives exist, which is better proactive action from end consumer, I just feel like there needs to be more emphasis on the bigger corporations doing the right thing.
Absolutely. I think I'm completely with you, and that's what we learned very early on in our journey. That if we don't bake sustainability into the existing customer journey, they're not going to want to do this.
Yeah.
Because we are, as consumers, spoiled for convenience, spoiled for speed. And personally, even I've used Ecosia, and I think I only lasted for 2 weeks because it's not
Yeah.
user
See,
friendly. Yeah, the options are much lesser, and I mean, I claim to be eco-conscious and
yeah.
Gen Z, right? Gen Z is our term for generation climate, which is any
Yeah.
person, entity, government body that believes in driving climate change and works towards it. So I think I am Gen Z, but I am still not choosing Ecosia and choosing Google when I
Yeah,
know
which is
the
such a
distance.
small change to make. Like now, when we are not making that small change, I don't know how do we make the bigger changes, because why do we want convenience? Because Ria, we don't have time. There's not
Yeah,
one oppressive system that we are fighting. There are multiple oppressive systems that we are fighting. Right? So we really don't have the time to do this.
absolutely. No, completely with you on this. So I think and that's what we're trying to do. If I wasn't clear about the journey, the customer doesn't really. This is a reward for them that they can choose to claim or not. Whether they do it or not, the climbs will be allocated at the end of the month to a project, right? So it's an additional feature where consumers can educate it, but it's not their responsibility in that sense. The brands are paying for this. The brands are going to create impact. The
That
consumers
makes
can choose. Yeah, the consumers can choose to allocate.
right.
So you definitely don't think it's the consumer's responsibility and it's large corporations and governments, right? How do you
Larger
think?
responsibility. of course lies with them, and I'm not saying I'm all for, we'll all have to change our ways. Honestly, I'm not saying like we are saints here. We all should also do better, and that is what all the SBCC, the social behavior change campaigns, aim to do,
Hmm.
right? But again, we have to recognize the limitations and how systems are not allowing us to fully do that. So yeah.
Got it. And do you think there's any way for us to nudge these um, corporate, like for at least for bigger brands, consumers, the more aware they are, the more they can question and drive change. Um,
Yeah, I think that is what we should do, and that is where media and independent creators, people like us, people who are doing this work, become very important, right? We need to drive down that message. The reason why, I'll tell you, it's a cycle with most causes, right? More movements, more social movements. It's a cycle. Even with the whole feminist cycle, now I think we are doing better in that. Of course, we have a very long way to go, but we are in a better space. Same with the queer movement. Same, all movements need, like, have to go through that cycle. So I feel like we need to keep making those consistent efforts to educate people where it becomes important enough for them. Now now feminism is an important thing, because is an important movement. People care about that movement. Brands are, they will not for their lives miss 8th March as a topical day. They will do something, they will, right? But they will miss 5th June, they will miss Environment Day. Some will pick it up, some will not, right? So what is important is that we ensure that this becomes an important conversation. And when will that happen? We have to see what has happened to other movements. We have to keep, they've put consistent efforts, they've put efforts across generations. Our race is also against time here, because honestly we've started seeing climate change and its impact. Every day we are seeing that impact. Our cities are becoming more unlivable, if I may say so. We are always like, like, I think we should be really scared about our futures now. So I really feel that we need to, as activists in this space, as people who are working and doing something, who have the information, who understood this, we need to accelerate our efforts and create a lot of content. I think content will play a very very big role in this movement. Unlike other movements, when other movements were going on, content wasn't like a big thing. Now we have content by our side, and we can really leverage it to create an impact. So we need to have these conversations more often. We need to have it with more important people. We need to have it with more inspiring people. I just think that needs to keep happening. We need to keep reiterating these messages, because then once brands will see that, oh, there are so many creators talking about environment, it's an important topic, you will also want to ride that bandwagon. I
hmm.
personally feel you make the cause cool.
Hmm.
Once you make the cause cool, everybody will want to hop onto it. Everybody would want to bring about that change. It will become suddenly important for everyone. I think if that's how they understand it, then so be it. We make them understand like this.
Got it. No, I think I completely agree with you on this. I really find the line you said about making a cause cool and then people wanting to do it. I think all of us knew it, but I've never really heard anyone frame it like that. So that's really, really cool. So I was recently having a look at a bunch of agencies across the globe, right? Purpose-led agencies and what they're doing, and I came across this movement where a bunch of marketing and ad agencies are signing a petition and saying we're not going to work with any client that earns from the sale of fossil fuels or its products, right? What do you think about that movement, and do you think Shebang would want to be a part of that?
So I personally feel that at Shabang, at least what we want to do is we have a foot in the door. Uh, we can have these important conversations, and of course, it's a product of policy. I'm not saying a marketing agency tomorrow going and having a conversation and bringing about a change, but we can have those conversations. We can do campaigns that initiate that change. right? So I feel like as an agency, it doesn't make sense for me to alienate them or boycott them. It just does make sense. I think movements become stronger when more people, more organizations get added to movements. What the boycott does is that it removes people from that movement. It removes them even from the future. In future also, if they change their mind, they can't become a part of the movement, right? We have to believe in change. It will happen even if it happens slowly, and we have to keep making our efforts to influence that change, and I think that's what we can do in our capacity. And like with any movement, any change, it will take its time.
That's a very interesting take. And a fresh perspective, because I don't think I have thought about this, like this. When I came across the movement, my initial reaction was, I would like to believe I'm an activist, which is why my initial reaction was I was just awed of these agencies. But I thank you for this fresh perspective. I think it makes a lot of sense, and we do need to work together towards climate change because we're running out of time, and
Yeah.
each and every stakeholder has a role to play. Varsha, who do you think among, definitely talked about various stakeholders and their roles, but who do you think is going to drive change against climate? Is it consumer brands, enterprises, the government, or consumers?
I do think it's not a one person's fight. It's a thing that we will have to take on. It's a challenge, honestly. It's not us against them, right? It's us against whatever has happened so far. All of us, including organizations, including everything. Because once we lose this train, right? If we lose the train of like doing better with the situation at hand, it's gonna affect us sooner or later. It's a pyramid. I look at the consequences of this as a pyramid. But what's sad really is that the communities that are already intersectionally marginalized are going to get affected the most, and they're going to get affected the fastest, right? Because we are all safeguarded by our walls, and they are not. And but again, none of us are safe enough. None of us are safe enough. Not even the bigger organizations. Nobody. Not even the most privileged person. That's the nature of the crisis that we are in. So yeah, I think it's time that we really understand it, and we really do proactively in our own capacities work towards this change, and most importantly, hold people accountable. I think that is where the change will come from. The first step, if you ask me, I don't know who's the most important stakeholder, but what I know is the most important step is to hold people accountable.
Completely aligned with you on that. I think I would just like to end things on a lighter note. And the podcast is called The Voice of Gen C. Gen C stands for any person, organization, community that is fighting the fight, that is fighting the climate fight. From the top of your head, who is a Gen Z for you that you look up to the most?
So I really look up to Sonal. They're the founder of this organization called Boond, and they make menstrual cups. And as a woman, menstrual cups have changed my life. I feel less guilty about my periods every month, and also they're quite comfortable for anyone thinking of making the change. But I think what I learn from them really is that you don't have to be in power to make change. You can make small change. What it takes is that will and that resilience, because living the lifestyle that they live is not easy. It's quite eco-friendly, it's quite sustainable. They're vegan. A lot of things they do which are not very convenient if we look at the standards that we live by today, right? They could have easily chosen to lead a more simpler life, but they are making those difficult decisions because they are very climate conscious, and I think like that really inspires me. So even if like what it inspires me to do is to bear a little bit of inconvenience, but choose better, make better choices, because I don't know like what is with us, we have gotten too entitled to convenience, and that is, I think, the biggest problem. So
Yeah.
yeah, I want to do better. I want to be a better person who doesn't always only think about myself and my convenience, and I want to make better choices, keeping everything in mind.
I think Boones was one of the first companies or products I also came across, when I was thinking about menstrual cups in India. And I think I really look up to the company as well, because they don't just sell a product, they're really creating a movement in that sense.
Yeah.
Even when you go through the website, right? There is one page for product, but there are so many more pages where they're
Yeah,
educating.
yeah, they really are. Like, like when I spoke about advocacy, I think they've really championed it, and how it's, so many interesting things. We may not even have to include this, but they're doing a lot of interesting things, like, menstruation and gender. So, we actually did the first campaign where with them, where we created India's first ads featuring non-women menstruators. So
Wow.
they're having a lot of conversations around important topics like that as well. Menstruation and reporting, because there are no rules on how, representation of menstruation in media. For the longest time, blood was shown as blue, and
Yeah.
so they're working very hard to, bring about those changes, and I think that's very interesting. That's very cool.
Yeah, I think another thing that stood out for me was that they're not just targeting your privileged crowd who are
Yeah,
educated, they're actually working on ground with people who
yeah,
are going to be the most affected by climate change. So
absolutely.
they truly set a great example of, what it takes to drive a movement and change, and I
Right.
definitely look up to them as well.
Right. Anyone else that you look up to, looking for inspiration?
So there are definitely a lot of people and organizations. I personally look up to Emma Watson the most, and she's not only a climate activist, and she might not have created a lot of real life change, but she's definitely brought this conversation in the mainstream, right?
Yeah,
So I don't
that's
think any individual has the amount of reach that celebrities do,
yeah,
especially global ones, right?
yeah,
And she is someone, especially our generation, has always looked up to, right from her starring in Harry Potter. And I think she is Hermione Granger in real life, because she does believe in a lot of these things, and she does more than just talk. And of course, I mean, I only know what she chooses to portray,
yeah.
but even that is important to me.
Even that is extremely important, and I think we should have touched upon this in our podcast also, the role that beyond media, people in power, people of influence can also have. I think that's also a part of, like, our ecosystem of marketing, media, all of that. And I do think that, influencers have a very big role. I think whoever has the power, they should definitely speak about it. They should definitely educate their audience about it. They should influence the brands. So if you know Coldplay, they don't do, all their concerts are also quite
Yeah.
eco-friendly. If like one band can do it, I'm sure like many more can do. They can ensure that, influencers and celebrities can ensure that all their sets are eco-friendly.
Yeah.
Those are small things that they can change. There are small things that can. It doesn't have to be a big change. But, if, say, for example, imagine like some 20, 30 big celebrities have started demanding eco-friendly sets. That will change the way, set design is done, or how production runs.
Yeah.
So that itself will make one big industry eco-friendly, right? And I think people should do that, and wherever they can make that more influence, they should definitely do it.
Yeah, and I think what happens then is that sustainability becomes a nature, it becomes so intrinsic to us as
Yeah,
individuals and as
yeah.
people.
I think
Yeah,
we should go beyond the immediate discomfort. I think
hmm.
That's important. That immediately it may be 4 steps extra,
Yeah.
but do it. It's fine. In the long run, it's going to become our second nature, and it's
And
important.
I think if more and more people start adopting to these inconvenient choices, the brands or innovators will be forced to make it more and more
Make it
convenient.
more convenient. Wow, I love that point. I really, really like that point. That it is inconvenient right now. Anything that has low demand and low supply as a result of low demand is inconvenient. But
Yeah.
if we keep demanding more, the supply will increase and it will become convenient. Our processes can change. Honestly, like we've evolved so much, we've accommodated so many things, we've accommodated AI for no reason. We can definitely accommodate, environmental, literally save our lives. And we should do that.
Absolutely. Great, Varsha. It was such a nice conversation.
Yeah, same.
Yeah, I really like that there were times when I you brought a new perspective
I'm
to
glad I could.
multiple spaces. Yeah, and I think that was really, really interesting because I think the conversations for me, the most interesting conversations are the ones where I might not align with what someone's saying initially, but after seeing their perspective, I have a lot to think about, and I think that's what this conversation has led to. And
I'm
I
so
really,
glad
really enjoyed it.
because I was
Yeah.
quite nervous and it was my first podcast, and also it's not a very like direct thing. Climate change and marketing,
Yeah.
like you can't draw the connection to begin with, but again, like everything has a role. That's how, omnipresent, our efforts have to be for environment. So yeah, I'm so
Yeah.
glad we had this conversation.